Good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Martin. I'm with the Neocon team, and I'd like to welcome you to the Neocon May programming series, Designing in a Digital World. I'd first like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's session qualifies for accreditation, and certificates will be emailed within 3 business days to everyone who stays on for the full session. And more details on accreditation can be found on neocon.com under programming. Also, the final 15 minutes of this session will be questions and answers, so please feel free to submit any questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. You can submit questions anytime during the presentation. So first, I'd like to provide a little background on our presenter. Today's speaker is Hush partner David Schwarz. David is an award-winning creative leader who spent his career designing brand experiences that integrate content, interactivity, architecture, and technology. David has been featured in numerous publications like Creativity, Fast Company, Inc. Magazine, Communication Arts, Cool Hunting, FWA, The Hub, among others. He's spoken at conferences for AIGA, The One Show, SCGD, South by Southwest, Adweek, Cannes Lions, FITC, among others. He is also a mentor at New Inc., the New Museum's Incubator Program for Art, Technology, and Design. Internally, David focuses on making space for creativity. This means cultivating studio environments that foster collaboration and trust, that promote democratic contribution, and generate an open repository of cultural, stylistic, and technological knowledge to inspire teams. And now I'd like to hand it over to David Schwarz to discuss experiences at work, spaces that inspire and unite.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen with you all. And Lindsay, give me a thumbs up if we can see it. Okay. I'm really excited to be here. I've thought about these topics for a long time, and they become even more prescient and important right now as we look at the future of our built environments and the way digital is going to play a part in them or not. And I'm excited to show you a bunch of things. I'm sure you're here to think about ideas, but also see some work that we recently created for Uber, and I'm excited to do both. So first, if you don't know our firm, it's called Hush. We're based here in Brooklyn, but we work all over the world. And we have a singular purpose. It's helping organizations articulate their mission by boldly connecting brand, people, and space. And we really focus on impacting any place where people work, like the workplace, invest, explore, learn. So we do work across commercial real estate, cultural institutions, retail, and obviously the workplace, which is maybe the focus of what we're talking today about. So, this is kind of some highlights of work that we do, the flavor of work that we do. We'll go into a couple other pieces later, but I just want to set the stage. I mostly want to set the stage in a way that makes anyone on this Zoom realize that, we're not trying to recreate Times Square, and we're not creating digital signage. And those things are the maybe most like archetypal or Pavlovian kind of responses that people think about when you ask a person on the street about digital experiences. And they think, oh, you mean big billboards, and oh, you mean, those screens you walk by every day and don't pay attention to. And unfortunately, that's the mass of the industry, and it tarnishes the way digital and experiential design can really be thought of much more in a beautiful way and an abstract way and a qualitative way that adds a huge amount of value to our built environment. And that's kind of what I hope you come away with at some level. And I'll show you some examples of that. So like I said in the headline for the conference, we talk about Uber, and it's such a fresh project that we don't even have a case study completed. I have some raw footage and things I'll show you. So it's actually a preview of a thing that might be better told in a few weeks. But we've been working on it for several years, and it's finally come to life in a nice way. So I do want to tell you about that. But in anything I present, I kind of think the work is a beautiful thing to show, and process is important, and meaning is important. But I'm also really into ideas, and I kind of like to think ideologically about what we're doing and where we sit in the world and what this moment in time means as designers, designers thinking about people, employees, workplaces, the rituals and behaviors of our lives these days and how they interrelate with the built environment. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on ideas, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of time on output, which is the project for Uber. So I have 93 slides. I think I have 247 images, GIFs, and videos. And I really only have one insight. And I'm going to tell you that insight right away. So you don't even have to wait for it. But I'm here to talk about this idea that, spaces inspire and unite. And I really, truly believe that they have the power to do that. And I actually think we've lost sight of that a little bit. So the headline is Spaces That Inspire and Unite. We're talking about architectural scale experience, but we're not architects. And we're talking about digital experiences, but we're not wholly in the digital world only, because at the scale we work at, we're zooming in at the way architecture and digital shake hands. And they can shake hands in a lot of ways. They can shake hands from an exterior expression standpoint. They can shake hands as a sort of storytelling layer inside architectural environments. But the idea that they're inert or that they don't talk to each other is just simply wrong. So we have a lot of great collaborations with our clients, our architectural partners, digital partners, and we really package it all together and look at the entire space as being potentially integrated through materiality, digital, technology, and form. So I think this isn't new. If you've been through a lot of programming already, this question has probably been asked many times, or at least there. It's really the question of the day, which is given the existential questions around our work lives as rituals and work as a thing we do, and of course the workplace, which we used to do it in. What purpose should digital experiences play? And is the thing they were doing prior to the pandemic still relevant? Or do we need to pivot and we're thinking about things incredibly differently? And so it's a big question to take on, but I hope to chip away at it today. So I told you I was going to tell you the thesis of my talk, and nothing like a giant rainbow GIF with the word inspiration on it to flag that is the thesis of the talk. It sounds simple. It's a behavior, it's a feeling, but I believe you probably are lacking it right now. And I think your colleagues are probably lacking it too. And it's almost like an emotion that you forgot. It's like if you've never been in love for a long time, you forget what love feels like. It's like if you've never been at peace for a long time, you forget what peaceful mind feels like. I think that's what the modern employee is thinking and feeling right now. They're so detached from their norm that they almost can't even remember what it was like and the feelings they had in the workplace at their optimized state, in their optimized position. And I'm driving to kind of get us back to that a little bit. So I believe that inspiration is a critical design product of digital experiences. And ultimately, the inspiration that digital experiences in the workplace can create will really help organizations retain and recruit the best talent in the world, and ultimately align them and motivate them around a shared purpose. So I think the built environment and workplace specifically is about doing that, is about translating an organization's vision and mission into experiences that take their people and give their people momentum towards a shared goal. And I think that's really hard to transpose into the state of the world we're in now. So I have a very poor mathematical equation. It's poor because it's not math, it's words, and it's also not specific. So shame on me. But it is exponential, meaning It's a three-part system. And I think inspiration comes from scale of space, scale of place. It comes from scale of people, and it comes from the level of interaction. And if you can really ratchet up the way digital experiences optimize all three of those things, you can really achieve some level of exponential impact in the workplace or at large. They all build off of each other, and they're all important. So if here are three factors for inspiration, we should go into each one of them. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've done and insights we've gained along the way to kind of prove out how each of these things play and our tools and factors into generating better inspiration. So let's look at simply scale. So, I think employees like you, like me, we seek both efficiency and inspiration, right? Sometimes you just want to put your head down and do the thing as fast as possible. And it's not about big ideas. It's just about getting a bunch of things done. And then, of course, we want to align with something that's of a higher order. With hybrid work, as we know, the scale of the workplace ultimately becomes a huge differentiating factor, because the sheer scale of arriving at place that's different than our home scale just delivers a level of emotion that we simply cannot replicate here, despite the best technology in the world. And so scale is a super important element of inspiration. And that's what I want to look at. So we've explored this in a lot of projects, and we hope to explore it at larger and larger scales over time. But this is a project we did for a biotech company in outside of Washington, D.C., and we brought scale to their workplace in terms of digital expression. Now, you're probably thinking, digital? This looks nothing like digital. I'm looking at a bunch of stainless steel fins and light. Well, this is actually a net zero building, and this energy wheel, we called it, is a 40-foot sculpture that is tapped directly into all the building management systems and energy systems, and is pulling real-time energy data to share with all the employees in the building how the building is performing at any given time. And so it's this empathy generator for the idea of sustainability and net zero, and the importance of that mission for the company for which it's built. And so every day, this reflects back mission of a company, as well as a digital specificity around the data of net zero energy. So this is scale. This is a statement at scale, clearly impossible to do anywhere else that's not in a building of this scale, but it really pays off. These are similar rendering prototypes for a financial institution which wanted to bathe their traders in light based on all the hard work they do from a engineering standpoint, writing algorithms that trade. And so all of a sudden they took a trading floor and asked us to wrap their most important people with the experience they have of actually doing their work every day. And how can that remind them of their purpose? This is Adidas's headquarters in Germany, which we worked on as a headquarters of sport, a stadium metaphor, if you will. So it was taking the scale and grandeur of walking into a world-class stadium and trying to make employees feel that connection to sport, that sport at professional level. And so walking in, you were bathed in this light of the teams playing each other, and essentially understood a connection to what it felt like to walk through the tunnel before getting to the stadium of a game with sound and light. So it really was a metaphor for that professional experience. This is a project for Capital One at their headquarters in McLean, Virginia. And it was all about looking at the employees and their behaviors and their successes and turning that data into beautiful visualizations. So everything you see here is generated by employee data, their behavior, their coming and going of the office, their behavior and movement around the office, their success in their own collaborations on their own team and team metrics. And we turned that into a visualization that reminded them of how working together is really powerful and can really make a statement in terms of their collaboration. So every little graphic, every little illustration you see is actually generated from a employee data point. And based on their changes day in, day out, week in, week out, the composition never is the same. It evolves as the employees of Cap One evolve. So these things are at scale. It's a little bit obvious to say that our home environment, like I'm sitting in now, can't deliver these kinds of ideas or feelings or messages at the scale of the workplace, but it's one we seem to overlook. It's one that seems we have forgotten in our desire to transpose work to virtual tools and platforms, and one I think we need. So the second one is people in this equation. I think we forget, people are our workforce, but helping people not just be individuals, but become part of this community and tribe, to wrap them around a shared purpose and somehow create like more of a sensorial connection to their peers and colleagues. That's the potential of a digital experience at the workplace. Certainly, there's ways to gather physically by employees in the workplace, but there's also ways that digital can help that gathering. And it's a sort of more is more, better together ideology. So can digital experiences incentivize people to come together and work on things together and be part of something together more than maybe just an analog or architectural experiences? And I think that is possible and very important. So this is some work we did with Instagram at their headquarters in San Francisco. And this is what you walk into when you walk into Instagram's headquarters in San Francisco. So if you think about it, this was their statement to the world, both their employees, their guests, their partners. When you walk in, who are we? What do we stand for? And it was a way to incentivize people to explore together and touch and feel and listen to the content on Instagram's platform. And so all of these spaces were activated by content that automatically were pulled down by Instagram, off of Instagram's platform, with a sheer touch of one of these beautiful light poles. So as you meandered your way through to your desk in different parts of the building, or took a guest or colleague or a recruit through, you could unlock all the pieces of Instagram and feel that Instagram's an incredibly art-leaning platform that's about creation and curation. But it's better with more people. So it's a place that you could do alone, but makes you feel part of something bigger when you're participating with others. Or a hotel hospitality concept that incentivizes what is usually a very private moment with a concierge and actually makes it a public moment to build community around the brand from the moment you walk into the hotel. Simple idea, but very different from a strategy standpoint. So how can digital experiences become that flame to which the moths arise? And then the last piece, I think, of my equation is really interaction. What do these people do in the scale of the workplace, and how do they do it? Well, interaction is a property of digital. It's by nature a definition of it. Architecture, you might argue, is mutable, and there's a lot of beautiful work and design in that mutability, but fundamentally architecture is static. That's why I called it static-ish. If digital is interactive, then we can incentivize people to be more inspired through their act of connection and seeking out and discovering and interacting. So the active mode helps people achieve more inspiration. And so we've explored that a lot. Getting stories and information to be shared, not just in a passive way, but actually having people explore. And interaction in the broadest sense, when you think about digital experiences, by no means touching a screen, although this is what I'm showing you right now. It incentivizes people doing something together. It incentivizes learning more deeply through participation. This is a retail project we did where you interact through voice and gesture. And so just the sheer new way of trying to think and learn and talk about stories, that changes your whole idea around what's possible. So you're inspired simply by the inputs that you're using to understand content. This is a project for Facebook where you simply look at a few pieces of information and then see how that information changes and moves around a 3 billion platform audience over time and space. And so interacting allows you to unlock that idea much more real and much more intimately than just walking by something or reading it. So this is a primary function of digital. And for Google, this is a place in their New York City headquarters, which really helps them unlock the story around Google and data and creativity and what's possible. And so through interaction, you're able to reveal and explore in ways that only Google technology would allow you to possibly do. And again, interaction can be anything, right? So what's the magic of interaction, even if it's not tapping and touching on digital surfaces and things, which we're so, I think, deadened to. And interaction can be small. This is something we built as an art project called Lenses, and you actually move these little prisms of around a magnetic board, and the amount of light and color that's shared actually changes a whole musical composition that you hear in real time. So by moving light around what is a sort of a chessboard, you actually create your own music. And so that kind of interaction adds a beauty to something. So we can apply even these small personal art project concepts to much bigger scale opportunities. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about work. Is work inspiration right now? I don't know. Doesn't feel like it. Probably doesn't feel like to a lot of people. I'm sure everyone on this call has read the Microsoft report, a survey it did a couple of weeks ago that revealed 41% of employees are ready to leave their job within the next year. So there's going to be a huge shakeup of talent. Why? I don't know. Missing this beautiful rainbow, right? It's people aren't inspired. They have figured out how to do the work and do it efficiently and juggle life and family and responsibilities and show up every day. But that is much different than showing up aligned around purpose and a vision and being inspired at what's possible. I think we're in a 4-act structure. It could have been 3X. 3X is always better, but I needed a 4th. Where are we? Okay, where have we gone in the past year? It's a nice way to look back at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure everyone's seen. We've spent the last year in the basement. We spent the last year jumping around between safety and psychological needs, between worried about employment or our own resources from a family standpoint, or security, or even some people really terrible. We're contemplating things at the baseline of the hierarchy. And that's a really hard place to make smart strategic decisions. It's almost impossible. You cannot move towards self-actualization if you're worried about safety. And the entire, and so if you look at Google's Project Aristotle a few years ago, there was a research report about what makes teams work and what makes the best teams strong. And, similar idea as Maslow's hierarchy, psychological safety of the team makes them work better together. And without that psychological safety, nothing else can be built on top of it, like collaboration or optimization or efficiency or inspiration. So in the same way, we've fought psychological safety and physical safety in the last year, and that's made our workplace experience really, really difficult. It's also made figuring out what the future workplace experience might be more difficult. So I think Q1 2020 was reactionary. We spent 6-9 months figuring out what this thing is, how we're going to treat our people, how we're going to treat our workplaces, how we're going to renegotiate a deal, how we're going to get work done, how we're going to stay alive. Incredibly reactionary and base level thinking. I'd say now we're in a visioning moment, and we're in a visioning moment because every day you read a new article about the hypothesis of the future of the workplace. They can't all be right, can they? Well, everyone has an opinion. And it's getting pretty boring, I have to say. So the visioning is almost paralyzing. And I think we're on a downward trend. And if we keep visioning in this downward trend, that's just bogged down by tons of information and decision paralysis, we're going to end up in a really bad place, because we have to make decisions now that are going to affect decisions that play out over the next 3, 5, 10 years. The cycle of corporate and commercial real estate leases. What's happening now is there's so much information and so much hypothesis, you get a camel. A camel is a horse designed by committee. We all know that. Camels are strange looking and acting. we don't want that. I won't tell you who said this, but I can tell you it was from a head of real estate at a global technology company, one of the largest in the world. You could probably guess, or maybe guess wrong, but you'll be close. We are totally paralyzed. There's a difference between the media impression right now and what's actually happening from investment dollars from teams and workplaces. There's a difference between what you hear on the airwaves about proclamations from CEOs about what they want their workforces to be versus where they're actually spending dollars. And that's a big deal. No one's moving. We're all hypothesizing and visioning, but we're not moving. So how do we get our visioning into a more proactive stance, out of fear-based, up the hierarchy of needs, back into self-actualization of making work in the workplace something that connects us to our higher order, our reason for being, our power, and start testing that. If we start testing that kind of thinking, we start to raise the curve, and the curve starts to trend upwards, and maybe we can start planting seeds around inspiration that will pay off in future redesigns. And we'll be in that kind of position in several years, and not a position where we sucked all the fun and interest and inspiration out of the workplace. So the last slide before I get into kind of like our work on Uber and get out of hypothesizing and thinking and ideology is really just a simple diptych. It's Steve Jobs's and Norman Foster's Apple Park on the left and the Blue Mosque, Turkey, on the right. It's not that weird to think about. The cult of Steve Jobs is a virtual religion. People who work at Apple are seeking a higher order of impact and opportunity for what they can contribute to the world and through their work. And where is this kind of thinking in today's day and age? Where is this kind of thinking in the future of workplace? It's not. We're efficiencying ourselves out of inspiring ideas and mission-driven ideas. So I'm sort of throwing up a warning flag. Okay, deep breath. That was kind of academic, but a really interesting kind of thought problem to be considering when you get bombarded with a million other things about the workplace. Okay, so Uber. This is a project we've been working on for a few years. It's gone fast, it's gone slow, it almost died, it almost came back, it went through a pandemic, it went through many phases of work and thinking, but the beautiful part is that it's here. And the reason it's here is because it was focused on a simple idea and a simple truth, trying to achieve a simple impact. And I believe that's why it made it through the entire storm of the last 3 years, but the last year. And simple always wins. So here's how it started. Dara, these are the things we heard when we sat down. You know, we need to highlight positive impact Uber has in the world. We need to change the mindset of everyone who works here, who we're recruiting, and the outside world, which is, you know, we're not about just making things, we're making things to have impact on people for good. And so how can the campus itself become a sort of highlighter for these positive impacts? How does it connect people from what they're making every day to its impact in the world? How do employees spend hundreds of hours working on an app, writing thousands of lines of code, or thinking about a technology product, and they don't look up to remind themselves of, oh, this piece that I'm playing is part of a puzzle that's much larger than me, and I feel proud to be part of that puzzle. And then how do recruits understand that if they're going to come to this company, and of course they're highly sought after recruits, so they're also talking to every other company around, how do they see their impact manifested in a meaningful way when they step onto campus? So I told you in the beginning, our mission is to really translate an organization's own mission to the 3 dimensions of an experience. And it makes sense that we would start with Uber's mission. And they had just rewritten it at the time. And it was a pretty powerful statement. And this is their mission: to ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. And it feels strong. And so we thought about that and thought about what that means and thought about how that could be represented in a way that feels natural, beyond words. you'll see that these words are never said in any of the work we did. They just became digested and turned into metaphor. So we thought about, well, Uber is motion. That's clear from the mission statement and from the things they do. It's a really beautiful way to encapsulate it all. The motion that Uber ignites ultimately turns into story. Every connective tissue, every ride, every delivery, every piece of data and insight it has about the way people behave and transportation works becomes a story, becomes an idea, a narrative, a moment. And if we could translate those stories into things that aren't just didactic, pictures of smiling faces, but rather an abstraction that connects people to Uber's mission, we might have something. And so we kind of came up with this idea that those stories could be light. Light is beautiful, light is positive, and light in motion feels a lot like the DNA of the Uber brand. So think about it. We looked at a single unit of light, and then we said, what could that light be? And where could it come from? In some cases, quite literally, could the light be generated by the data of a ride? Could a light illuminate when Uber launches in a new city globally? Could the light illuminate when a new rider signs up, or a new driver signs up, or a new product is invented, or a new business line starts? All these things are just inputs. Some of them are actual data that we pulled from, and some of them are ideas. But either way, they're all catalysts for light. And if light is a story, moving light becomes an even more compelling and on-brand story against Uber's mission. So you start to see the parallels here of how we can create metaphor out of this one single idea that light is story. And then you can kind of ramp it up. And, a hallmark of our work is trying to make complex ideas super simple. And so we never shy away from simplicity. And this core idea is really simple, but it stacks on itself in a nice way. So more light, more ideas, more stories, more movement. And so ultimately that kind of strategy and positioning, and then a bunch of exploration and work led us to what we call the stream. And the stream is a digital experience that we integrated into the sort of main event welcome lobby of Uber's new headquarters in Mission Bay, San Francisco. And, we designed a bunch of things that could be that, and used the stream as a metaphor and thought about image and motion. But at the end of the day, we came up with a really simple solution. And it was this beautiful idea that we would custom make these lights, and they would live in a tube. And those tubes could be units of measure. And if we move light through those tubes, we would express the Uber brand innately. But if we organize those tubes of light in ways that are more dense or less dense or more different forms, we can actually turn that light into actual recognizable stories. We can stay as abstract light in motion, which is on brand at the highest order, or those pieces of light can come together and form imagery, form words, form more didactic stories. So we had this beautiful sort of, like accordion of potential, just with this simple form and this simple idea and this simple technology ultimately. And so as you get more and more things together, you get higher fidelity of story, you get higher digital resolution, and ultimately you get the highest order of interaction. And so that becomes some kind of structure elements. You have a stream that flows from the second, third, fourth stories of the campus down into the atrium, into the lobby, and sort of pools together and tells these stories more literally. So this is what it's like in section. And what happens is it's as if the workforce on the floors above are working to create things. Could be a line of code, could be an idea, could be an innovation, could be a brief, but there are all these little lights, and there are all these little contributions to impact of Uber, and they gravitationally flow down and settle inside the lobby for all to see, as if the bees in the beehive are producing the honey that we get to see upon entry. Technically, we built these things as little units of light. I said that metaphorically before, but I actually mean we built units of light. We figured out actually our own custom lighting hardware to make this like a Lego brick. And we could combine these things in any way. So we did a bunch of tests with some partners and figured out how each of these units of light would look most optimally, but also how they could gang together and just become a chain that's infinitely scalable. And ultimately, we're rolling this out actually to 3 or 4 other cities globally, using this same idea of small, simple, light movement becoming other forms, more scale appropriate for different workplaces. So then beyond just light in a tube, which is pretty simple, we started to look at representation of motion and how igniting motion could show up. And so we looked at beautiful kind of glitchy art, beautiful streaky art, graphic palettes from their brand identity, gradient light and color, that's all part of their brand palette. And then we started to kind of map them to the space and what that might look like on different canvases all around the lobby and into the building, and how that might resolve just as moving light. And so, you see the relationship between story that's didactic and sort of these light tubes and how they could interact. And then we prevised and prototyped tons of interaction. People would interact and galvanize stories around their behaviors and their positions. So if groups are there, more stories are told. If it's a single person, simpler, easier to digest stories are told. But really thinking about how sound, a palette of sound, a palette of content, and a human interaction at scale starts to come together to remind people of their higher order mission. And so these are just some fun tests. This is like super in the weeds design, but I hope you appreciate it. This is the rigor of thinking about how light, graphic form, brand moves together and forms an entire palette that feels on brand and on mission. And so it's countless tests and tests and tests to see how that works. Seeing it in different forms, in different shapes, in different angles, at different speeds. We built this entire system so we could tune it like a race car. What's fast, what's slow, what feels right, what feels too much, what feels too little, and programmed it over the course of an entire day. So again, light that was just light in motion becomes light that's typography and says messaging, becomes imagery that connects people to people. And so on. And then we got to build it. So we we're on site and we do everything down to the last pixel and square inch. So these were some of the construction photos that happened recently. So some on-site testing, once it was there at scale, we could really put it through its paces and understand the feeling, right? Because it's one thing to say we have the structure that does this and that and has these modalities and tells these different stories and connects to the mission. But ultimately, if all the experiential qualities of sound, light, material, form, scale don't come together in this beautiful balance, it doesn't matter. So we're there tuning all the dials to make sure it feels right and it's expressing exactly what it's meant to express. And so here are some of the images that I literally got like 48 hours ago from the site in our shoot there. And I don't even know if they're really color corrected, but I hope you like the imagery themselves. I think it's quite poetic and a really beautiful balance with the architecture and those shop architects and RMW, and just really making them feel like it's not an outlier as a digital thing. It's actually, it feels like it's a natural part of the environment and was always meant to be there and speaks to the environment around it. So I think in this project, you have the 3 factors I mentioned. We hope this inspires for the employee that walks in on day 1. We hope it inspires employees that have been there for years. And we have scale, we have a level of interaction, and we have a place for people to gather and feel as part of a team and a community that's different than anything they could possibly see anywhere else, but also anything they could do at home. and this is just some quick footage, but I think you see how, especially in the upper left, there's this relationship between the sort of idea of what Uber does and impacts in the world and creates and makes, and the feeling of walking into the building. It's like moving under an overpass when you're in a car. It's like seeing the motion of transportation from above. We built in these architectural moves, so it feels like traveling around a city and all the things you do with Uber. And that's it. So I wanted to open it up for Q&A, and I hope I inspired some thinking and maybe some different thinking in this critical moment as we redesign the future of work and architectural space. Thank you.
David, thank you so much. Sorry, I had a little technical glitch there. What an excellent presentation, and your projects are just stunning. They're brilliant. They're beautiful, and I can say, just looking at the Uber project, just at the pictures, I imagine being in that space, it's probably an overwhelming feeling, and just the breadth of Uber and its impact on the world. And I see how you can get that from that massive installation with all of the different aspects of the company, its mission. So really, really well done.
Thank you.
I'm gonna grab some questions, and I haven't had a chance to look at them in advance because I was just looking at your images and your video. So I think, okay, so this first one goes back a bit to your equation of inspiration. So in terms of scale, you emphasize scale as a critical part of your design equation. How do you suggest scaling the design ideas you discussed to accommodate the needs or resource limitations of smaller employers as opposed to large ones like Uber or Adidas?
That's a great question. And I realize, the clients we work for are mostly global organizations, and they have a scale of appetite, a scale of CapEx dollars, and a scale of space, just from a headcount standpoint, that you can kind of get there already just from walking in the door. And how might that work for mid or smaller size companies? Well, scale is a great word because it has to scale appropriate to the scale of your business, right? So if you're a 100-person business with a 20,000 square foot office, you can still do things at that scale that are relatively big. And I mean relatively in the context of relative to the scale of your space, your people, et cetera. So it's not necessarily about building, the Eiffel Tower every place you go. It's really about a gesture that stands out. So I think if you qualify scale as like a commitment to something, right? You walk into any space and there's something there that says, look at me, I'm important, I have something to say, I'm valuable to you. That's I think that's your litmus test for what I mean by scale. And I think I quickly went through it because there was only one page and I didn't really want to spend time on it, but that's kind of what I was talking about with this Uber project, in that we're scaling it to other places in the world. And yes, there's still Uber headquarters, so it's still Uber from an investment standpoint, but the spaces are quite small. I mean, we're doing New York's space. It's New York, right? So it's not the grandeur of a campus in the way the Bay Area has. And so how to think about this same story, these same components in a way that is more appropriate to New York is exactly the goal. And it's actually a beautiful design challenge. So I don't want to say it's easy, but I want to say it's possible. And I think it's just about like standing out and meaning something and saying something. In architectural parlance, it's like the move, right? That's how architects talk. What's the move? So what's the digital experience? Move. What's the thing you say? This is what we're putting forth as a expression.
Yeah. I have a question. When you were showing some of the projects that you were using data to create these digital experiences or installations, are the employees very aware of the significance of the installation when it's more abstract? Do they understand that, these images are appearing because this many people, contributed to the company? do they even need to know what the data is for? Do they feel it just from being in the experience? Is that the goal? How does that factor in?
That's a great question. And one we get asked by both our clients and folks like you. So here, the answer is yes. And we like to think of our work as artistic and informational, and that's a spectrum, right? Certain types of ideas or data or stories can be totally abstract. Like I told you, a piece of white light moving through a tube. What does that mean? Well, abstractly, it relates to Uber and their idea of movement. But might that white light be actually a data point that is a real quantitative piece of information? Absolutely. Now, how much as an audience do I know that? I might get the artistic and aspirational idea of it, but not know where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So really, the positioning of artful versus informational is a brand messaging strategy. It's where do you want to be and why? And certain things can be overly informational. You can tell too much. It can be too overload. And certain things can just miss because no one actually understands the why. So we've handled that in several ways. Let me give you some examples. In the beginning, I mentioned scale. And in that scale section, I talked about a Capital One project. That Capital One project is it's totally abstract. But in that run of show and as didactic panel in the lobby, you learn what you're looking at. So there's a clarity that's given without undermining the artistry of it, right? In other work we've done, that informational level is like front and center because that's what we want to deliver. People want to know what they're seeing and they want to make quantitative decisions from it. So what's cool is if you start from quantitative information, you can always abstract it into artistry. Mm-hmm. And you can always leave it as quantitative information. If you start abstract, you can never make it quantitative. So we do a lot with that kind of thinking around data and employment behaviors and product usage and APIs and things that are like really hardcore metrics. And then we're a translator and we translate that to design and deliver it in a way that feels right and sits right. So I think I answered your question, but
yeah. This kind of leads into this question a bit. So at what point during the design process with the design and architecture team is your team typically brought in on a new build?
That's a great question. So it happens ideally, and then it happens ideally, and then sometimes it just happens. And we can kind of enter in several different ways, but the potential of our impact is different depending on when we're involved. So we work with clients, tenants, brands like Facebook, Uber, Google. We're there to shepherd their storytelling around their mission, not necessarily design the full-scale architecture of their space. We can't do that. We have architects on staff, but we have to work with a partner who understands the scale of that endeavor, core programmatic requirements, et cetera. The best relationships are when we come to the table at the same time. And so as those programmatic requirements are being thought about and worked through, we're just there thinking at it through a storytelling and human experience level and understanding all the ways digital and technology and content can influence behaviors, change their perspective of space, help the narrative journey in ways that pure architecture or material can't do. And so in our best relationships, we have this really beautiful collaboration where in the service of the client, both functional and messaging, we're working together to kind of shape it and mold it, almost like two hands on a piece of clay. And at the end of the day, there's bigger fish to fry building a campus of Uber scale than what we did, but we are often the sort of one of the first or second impressions, if you will. So while we're not in control or input on the whole thing, we are from a message and voice standpoint, one of the first things you see and understand. So that's a long way of saying earlier the better. And a lot of times we'll do like conceptual sprints with architectural partners just to help influence thinking and go back and forth a little bit. Then there's phases of work that are much more foundational, if you will, and then we come back in and start the design process in concert. So yeah, earlier is better, but we can come in later a little bit too. It's just the scale of our impact is going to be much more bounded, as you know.
Great. I have a couple technical questions.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Do circadian rhythms take account of your light sourcing, blue versus red scale?
Awesome. Yes, great. Awesome question. Yeah, so we delivered, in addition to the full run of show, the content package, all the software and hardware handoff, we have a complete 24/7 weekly, yearly cadence that changes color, temperature, and like intensity of the experience based on time of day, et cetera. So it's impossible to tune it perfectly. It's not impossible, it's possible. But if you think in broad strokes, we're just reminded that we know what kind of light we want to have when we wake up in the morning. We know what kind of light we want to have when we're kind of ending our day. We know what the sun is doing. We know what the rhythm beyond circadian rhythms of the human body, but the rhythms of the workplace day, when people are coming in, when they're leaving, how the occupation of the lobby space is. And it's tuning it to those ebbs and flows, right? It might be the case that you want to slowly get people into the mission when they're coming in the morning. And so we tune the light to be a little bit more easy, wake up, but also we don't hit them with this intensity of walking in every day. But maybe at midday, we want to really ramp it up because people are awake, they're in full swing and that kind of thing. So it's really mapping that with our clients and understanding what their unique behaviors of their culture is, but also what we know about circadian rhythms in the human body and senses. So it's like a biological play as well as just a cultural play.
Okay. So these two questions, I think they kind of go hand in hand, and kind of along the lines of what you were just describing. So what sort of consultants do you bring in on projects? And then another question is, has anyone had any adverse reactions to these installations, health-wise? And do you bring consultants in for that?
That's a great question. So yes, we work with lots of consultants. We work with lighting consultants, engineering consultants. I mean, so put a pin in the big question. We are fundamentally a design firm and a technology design firm. So we're writing software, we're creating content, we're designing with technical hardware, and we're also giving it all the front end aesthetic part of the design. But that's it. And in every spoke, we need hardware providers, we need AV systems consultants, we need lighting consultants, we need sound and acousticians consultants, MEP consultants, like it goes all around that. So that's our core function, and we don't stretch beyond that. So we work with partners with anyone who's an expert outside of the capabilities we have. So lots of consultants, lots of org charts, lots of figuring out who's doing what and where our responsibilities stop and their start. But we manage it all, which I think is an important piece of our value proposition to a client. They don't need more complexity. As far as adverse reactions, I'd be crazy to say that anyone had an aneurysm or something, but of course it's a design project. So part of design is iteration, right? And is launching and learning and getting feedback and changing and iterating to V1.1.2.3. So I can't say we have any feedback in Uber yet because it's not officially launched and open, but yeah, over time we've had people come back and say, hey, this feels too fast, or it feels a little too overwhelming, or can we look at how to change this? Or we had a change in our company values or structure. How does that affect this in a way that we can actually manifest in this digital experience? So I think it's less about health and it's probably more about optics and feel. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, this is in a different direction. Since sustainability and energy efficiency are hot and important topics that we're all thinking about, how do you consider or factor this into your design and projects?
Awesome. It's a huge focus for us, as it is for any major organization, but it's a huge focus of us because we believe like our mission to serve our clients' missions has to align with sustainability and broader ESG initiatives. If they're going to achieve their mission, we have to achieve our mission with them. So I don't know if this panelist or attendee rather missed like the first thing I showed, which is no problem, but that project for that biotech company is our a huge business case for us that we're working with a lot of other clients on, which is how does digital experience, which is very cost heavy in the sustainability world. It's energy suck. A lot of the technology materials and products have a terrible life cycle. And so they have external costs far beyond their hard costs of acquisition. So we've actually figured out a way through that project to build in the costs of those investments and to show it back to our client as an overall cost and impact structure for the design. So they're able to give us feedback and say, well, I love this, but the cost from a sustainability standpoint is too high. How can we re-engineer this to be more on mission, et cetera? So there's kind of like a math that we put into it, but then there's also a desire to think of technology not necessarily as the super crazy sports car, energy sucking stuff, and to de-technological the opportunity. So for example, that biotech project, that's like super like low energy lighting. Yeah. It's big and it's beautiful and it moves like digital things. It's really, really, really low energy use. And so that was part of the design solution. It wasn't just something we ended up on. It was like, if we're going to stay on energy budget for this project, we can't just look towards big high-res LED things for a lot of reasons. So what are smart design solutions that could do the same storytelling without the energy use? So it's just like a design input at this point, right? It's how do our clients value it? What's the opportunity cost? So how do we design with that in mind?
That's great. Okay, we are running out of time, but there's one last question here that I think is interesting and pretty relevant. How could you use your storytelling tools to make the hybrid in-office collaboration meeting room experience of the future more meaningful and help activate or incorporate remote workers into that experience?
That's a good question, and one that we've seen. We're seeing a lot of work around. Part of it is, I don't know if we're the firm to answer that.
Sure.
But I think it is an honorable goal. I think, we've explored areas of equity and inclusivity for how this would work and how not to create divisiveness between folks who are working at home and those in the office. And I think there's some pretty smart attempts at that right now, mostly by the big tech companies who can invest in this kind of technology before it's a product. I think scale plays a part, right? Is like level setting scale. It's weird when you're looking at a human-sized person across a table and then you're looking at a small size rectangle on a screen. That scale difference creates divisions in equity instantly. So scale comes back again. So you see how some of the solutions have been human scale digital representations and human scale humans kind of in the round. But I have to say, like, and maybe this is a political answer to your question, but that's not going to get me back to work. So that's not what we're really focused on. I think if we could figure out an inspirational way to do that, maybe more like not redesign the conference room of the future, but more like what is a place that employees could gather to perform things together that are truly inspirational, even if everyone's not on site. That's a different question. And then we kind of get out of the raw communication technology problem, because that's pretty foundational and pretty baseline. And we get more into the what is interactive experiences between virtual and digital, virtual and real life people that really make them think and emote and feel in ways that they couldn't do previously. That's sort of more of the question for a firm like ours, I think.
Yeah, that's great. David, thank you so much. There were several questions that we did not get to, but our partners at Work Design Magazine are going to be doing an extended recap, which will be emailed to everyone on this program today and will also be available via our social platforms, our websites. We'll get it to you where they will answer some of the questions that weren't answered. We'll also send David all of the questions and all of the comments just so he can see what the conversation was and get back to anyone if he'd like. So David, thank you. So interesting and such beautiful, amazing, thoughtful, and inspirational projects, truly. We really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.